Well, you know, I find myself here on the HighWire. This is our 167th episode. Incredible. All started in a closet where someone said you should really try hosting your own show after I'd just been in someone else's podcast. But before that, I was a CBS producer working on the daytime talk show The Doctors. All of that was unearthed. My life changed because I got a call from a scientist that said, there's a whistleblower inside of the CDC that is going to come forward and confess that they are committing scientific fraud on the vaccine autism study, specifically the one in 2004. Of course, that ended up being Dr. William Thompson was the CDC whistleblower. The man he was confessing to was Dr. Brian Hooker. This is just an excerpt from Vaxxed to remind us who Brian Hooker is, because he has a brand new study that's out. Take a look at this.
When a CDC scientist who'd been there at that time 17 years tells you this is how you access data, it didn't take me very long to realize, oh, I better do what he says, because he knows what he's talking about.
I just want to tell you one thing. Right now, I'm sitting in a very pretty position in terms of providing you a lot of information.
He asked me, what data sets are you going to request? And I said, well, I'm going to request 2 of the studies that you've done on thimerosal, the mercury-containing preservative that's used in some of the vaccines. And he said, well, that's fine, but I want you to request the MMR data set first. And this is the study by Frank DiStefano and his colleagues in 2004.
It was the one study where we could end up creating a mess while the CDC tried to sort out something they couldn't understand.
Well, if it wasn't for Brian Hooker, we would not know about Dr. William Thompson. If it wasn't for Brian Hooker, there would be no Vaxxed, which means there would be no HighWire, and I would have a very different life right now. And I have to tell you, I love what I do. I love the work that we're getting done here, and it is my absolute honor to bring on Dr. Brian Hooker. Brian, you did it, right? You've got a study. One of the things that we talk about, as we've been saying, you know, how do we get to the end of this vaccine debate? We're told that vaccines are safe. We're told they're effective. You know, I've been winning lawsuits against National Institute of Health, Health and Human Services, CDC, FDA on this topic. But the one thing, you know, that we keep saying is we just need to compare vaccinated individuals to completely unvaccinated individuals. In fact, you know, we were at a meeting at the National Institute of Health set up by Donald Trump, and that was the primary question we asked is, why doesn't the CDC just take the database, the VSD, the Vaccine Safety Data Link, you got tens of millions of people's medical records, and compare the vaccinated to the unvaccinated? After a back and forth, essentially, they told us we will essentially never do that study. But you have just gathered data to attempt to do that study, and you are finally published with it. So tell me about this study. How many children were involved in the study, and what did you discover?
We had a total in the analysis that we did, the final analyzed data set had 2,047 children. These 2,047 children were from 3 representative pediatrician practices across the United States, and we were able to follow them up from birth in those medical practices, through their vaccination records, through their first year of life, all the way until they were at least 3 years of age, in order to see if we could get specific diagnoses and what the outcomes were for those that were vaccinated for their first year of life versus those that were not vaccinated during their first year of life.
And so really they could have been vaccinated after that first year of life, but you were just trying to see if in that first year you were vaccinated, how does it affect the rest of your health outcomes as you move forward to the age of 3? What were the things that jumped out in this study as you looked at it?
Well, we looked at 4 different conditions. First of all, developmental delays, then ear infections, asthma, and gastrointestinal disorders. We did want to look at specific developmental delays like autism, but our sampling size was so small, and these were practices that were friendly to unvaccinating families, and so we had fully 30% of that group was unvaccinated, and about 70% was vaccinated during the first year of life. And what stood out specifically was a very, very, very high correlation between vaccines and asthma, also vaccines, developmental delays, and then vaccines and ear infections. And then when we went further in our analysis, we actually looked at the number of vaccines that children received in their first year of life versus those who were unvaccinated. And as more vaccines were added, as children were following the CDC schedule, which is up to 21 vaccines during the first year of life, then we saw those relationships strengthen, and we also saw a strong, statistically significant relationship with gastrointestinal disorders. So it was an effect not only for vaccinated versus unvaccinated, but it was also an effect that strengthened if a child during their first year of life was getting more vaccines.
So you even saw more vaccination was higher than less vaccination, that led to more health issues. So when we hear about asthma, what was the increased risk of asthma, for instance, in the vaccinated group?
Children that were vaccinated during their first year of life were 4.5 times more likely to get an asthma diagnosis than those that received no vaccine. So it was very, very high, and it was also highly statistically significant, beyond, you know, any type of doubt, beyond anything that would be, say, oh, well, you know, unvaccinated children go to the doctor less, so there's a difference in healthcare seeking behavior. These, what we call effect estimates, which are basically increased risk, were all above 2.0, which means that there's just no way that they can be explained away. There is some type of relationship with them getting a vaccine during the first year of life and these disorders.
Now, a lot of times we hear that, you know, this type of science, right? Anytime you're questioning vaccinations, there's really critical, the review process is very critical. Was it difficult to get this paper published?
I have to laugh. The peer review process normally, you know, I've published over 60 peer-reviewed scientific articles in my career, and the peer review process typically takes anywhere from 2 months to 4 months. And for this particular paper, we were under some type of peer review for 1.5 years, for fully 18 months. And the first 6 months were journals just basically rejecting the article without even allowing it to be peer reviewed. And then the final 12 months were sage open medicine, just checking, double checking, triple checking. We went through 4 rounds of peer review with this journal, which is, we're very fortunate that they would publish such a work, and my hat is off to them for their academic integrity. But we were in the process with them for a full year.
Wow, that is incredible. Thank you for your diligence, and of course to Sage, that obviously, I mean, look, they're going to come under fire if they don't peer review it, but 4 times, 12 months to get a paper published. You've been hinting at this for quite some time with me. It's looking good. There's something coming. Well, it's finally here. So again, anyone that really, you know, don't take my word for it. Don't take Brian Hooker's word for it. All you have to do is type in ICAN right now into your comments if you're on Facebook, or if you're on YouTube or watching the HighWire.com or any of our other platforms. Just text 33222 and type in ICAN in the message, and we'll get you this published study by Brian Hooker in Sage, along with Joel Hayes' website and everything that you see here today. Brian, I'm proud of you, man. I know you've been working at this. You don't give up, and this is just more proof. And you know what it really comes down to, and you know what the argument's going to be, right? It's only 2,400 people, right? We knew this with the Mawson study that did this thing. There's only 600 and something people. You know, it's not big enough. You know, it really only shows us a signal, right? But isn't that the whole point, Brian? We're seeing a signal every time we do this, no matter how big the group. And now you certainly have more people involved here than we saw the 600 in the homeschooled Mawson study. I know he's working on a bigger project. But isn't the message really, hey, CDC, hey, NIH, hey, Tony Fauci, how about this? How about instead of like saying everybody's crazy or having CNN say that no science exists when it actually does exist? And I know you're all going to attack Brian Hooker, but the only way they really win, Brian, is by doing an actual vaxxed versus unvaxxed study themselves. I mean, don't you really feel like that's what you've established now? We've now done this multiple times independently. It is time for our government agencies, and I would say the government agencies around the world, sort of like Joel Hayes saying, right, about blood testing. We could figure these things out in 72 hours. Wouldn't you agree that we could figure out the vaxxed versus unvaxxed? And if vaccinated children truly are healthier, it would take maybe 72 hours or 2 weeks to start running data out of the VSD, which I know you've worked with, and other things like that. What's your message to the health departments of the world that are going to try and discount your study instead of actually do something about it?
When we look at these small-scale studies, when we look at the Mawson study, when we look at my study, when we look at other compiled studies, almost 60 studies that are compiled on children'shealthdefense.org on their website, where we looked at, you know, different types of vaccinations and unvaxxed studies there. When you look at the compilation of that evidence, it's high time that the CDC, that the FDA, that the National Institutes of Health, who have these large repositories of information, could look and replicate our work, or let independent scientists, which is much more appropriate, into these databases and let them replicate this type of work to see what type of results they get. One of the things that I asked for in the paper is this deserves additional study. The signal that we are seeing here needs additional studies so we know what are the chronic health outcomes of those children who are vaccinated versus those children who are unvaccinated. They exist, they're out there, they're even in CDC's database, and like you said, you could have results in 72 hours. This is not rocket science. I'd like to pretend that I'm that smart, but it wasn't that difficult of an analysis to do. It's more of a task of assembling all the information. But for CDC, the information is already assembled. So absolutely, this needs further study. We need larger groups of children, and we need also to caution families, because the results that I've seen, the results that Tony Mawson has seen, and others have seen, they are valid.
Incredible. Well, Brian, you are amongst many heroes that we are representing today, but I think when we think of Vaxxed and the massive impact that Vaxxed has had all around the world, as I said, if you haven't seen Vaxxed, by the way, you got to go to www.vaxxthemovie.com. It is a film like none you will ever see. It is very, very powerful. Of course, at the center of it is Brian Hooker and Dr. William Thompson. Well, Brian, I'm not sure if you saw it in the news, but Vaxxed is not done making its impact on the world. A brilliant headline came out of Australia because there is now a Vax tour. This was it. Group of anti-vaxxer mothers launch a bus tour to spread dangerous theories across Australia by telling vaccination horror stories, and they want you to pay their costs. Well, of course, this was an article by the Daily Mail, which never likes anybody that's questioning the safety of vaccines. But what they're talking about is the Vaxxed bus, not the one that was here, but there is a spawn, Vax 2. The bus is now in Australia, about to begin its tour, which I'm sure, Brian, you must have some of the same feelings I did. I remember the moment, by the way, when I first thought of the title Vax. The film wasn't called that. I was, really praying on it, thinking, I think we were calling it CDC whistleblower at some point. But I said, we need a word, we need to really create a new vernacular around this. And boom, it popped into my head, Vaxxed, and took many, many months before it actually landed in the position of being the actual title. But isn't it great to see this happening, that this story and the people's stories are going to be recorded on the other side of the planet?
Absolutely, and I have to thank you, for the name Vaxxed and for your tremendous work on the movie Vaxxed. It would not have been a reality if you had never gotten involved. It would have been different. And I dare say, we are, and Vaxxed is the gift that keeps on giving. You know, the CDC whistleblower story happened 6 years ago. Vax
Yeah.
came out 4 years ago. And it's continued to have momentum. It's continued to have inertia. And I'm so thankful for my Australian colleagues. I was down in Australia 3 years ago with the Vax One
Well,
tour.
hold on a second. Let's let you say,
us.
hold on, Brian. Let's let you say hi, because my understanding is we've got Anita Halfmeiser, who is president of AVN, that has put the Vax tour together, joining us now from Australia. Anita, first of all, congratulations. What inspired you? I mean, this is a heavy lift. This is a big lift. And when we've been looking at the news in Australia, which is just, can I say, even more vitriolic than the discussions of vaccines in America. I don't think there's anywhere like Australia, and yet you've got a bus. You announced the media. We're going to start driving around the country. What made you decide to do that?
Well, we were out of options, really. I mean, you've seen what the media does here. Our politicians don't listen to us, no matter what we write, no matter the concerns we have. We always get told vaccines are safe and effective. There was actually recently a letter writing campaign about no mandatory vaccinations and vaccination policy to politicians. And a couple of Australian politicians actually put up Facebook posts saying, all you anti-vaxxers, don't even bother writing to us. Your letters are just going straight in the bin. So that's what we're up against with politicians. With the media, they are just vile. As you've seen, they can't call us anything else. It can't get any worse, Del. So we're not worried about the media anymore. Like, we've been baby killers. We're worse than terrorists. Polly got thrown out of Australia under terrorism legislation. She was a threat to the peace and good order of Australia for talking to parents of vaccine-injured children. That's the state of Australia. So we're just done with politicians, we're done with the media, we're done with the censorship on social media. We have very little reach now, very little. So we're taking it to the people. We've got a bus and we're going around Australia because it's our last option, basically. We think it's a good one. We've asked the government to do an unvaxxed vax study for years. They have all that data in the Australian Childhood Immunisation Register. They've had that since 1998. They could easily do a vaxxed-unvaxxed study in Australia. We were promised one in 2013 on national television. Professor Peter McIntyre said that study would be done. Last year, we did an FOI asking for any information on that study, and we were told no information exists. In other words, he just said that on television, but the government had no intention whatsoever of doing that study. So we'll be going around Australia in our lovely bus doing our own vaxxed, unvaxxed study like Polly did in America. And thank you guys for bringing us vaxxed, because that is what has started this whole thing. You know, it's just gave such momentum to everything. It's just incredible. And we put out our press release on Monday about this bus. We've already had over 700 people register to tell their stories on the bus.
Wow.
That's in 4 days.
Wow.
So it's going to be huge. It's going to be huge. We did have a few quotes in the media that they want that we shouldn't be allowed in public parks and public spaces to even stop and talk to people. So that's the level it's getting to now. We can't even talk to people in a public place. But you know, we're going to do this. We're going to do this because we have to do this. And, you know, we're going to be brave. We're going to be brave, Del. And,
Right.
you know, they've messed with the
Sure
mummies and they've messed with the wrong mummies. So we're going to do this.
So proud of you. You know, Brian and I were directly involved with Vax, and I was there when we first started driving around the country in the Vax bus. But I've said that as brilliant as Vaxxed is, I actually think that those recorded interviews, the thousands of interviews, all of those signatures, that's the original Vax bus, all of those are the signatures of injured children, injured people. Some have died all after vaccination, the traveling memorial. I've said I think the most important work that any of us have ever done is that work by Polly Tommy, who was one of my co-producers on Vaxxed, of course, was kicked out of Australia when she came out there to visit you. But that body of thousands of interviews that anyone can go to Vax.com right now. You can watch those interviews yourself. You can click on the state you live in to see those that happen around you, or you can click on the vaccine if you're curious about a specific vaccine. But I think to the idea that now we're going to get a whole new demographic, right? And on the other side of the world, Brian, collecting data all over Australia of people wanting to tell their story. What are your thoughts, Brian, let's take this moment to smash the front of that bus with a champagne bottle. What are your thoughts?
Anita, thank you so much. I am so excited for this Vax Tour 2 tour, and I hope that they've opened up the state borders now. I know that Australia was under a bit of lockdown between their specific states, but I couldn't be happier when I see the records in Australia in terms of over 10 million children in the Medicare database in Australia, and the tenacity that you've had in terms of going after that, holding the government's feet to the fire. And I would say Australia, the Australian press, the Australian government is the United States on steroids. The short time that I had there was just incredible, and my hat's off to AVN because of the odds that you're working against, and you just keep going. It's just wonderful, and my heart and my prayers are with you. I know you're going to get thousands of stories, and I can't wait to see the outcome.
Yeah, I second that.
Thank you so much, Brian. Yeah.
What can we do for those that are viewing right now? Where do you need help? What's the best thing we can do to help you out on this mission to take the word out and gather the people, give them a place to speak? So many, I think that was the beauty of Vax, really, was the movie theater was just a meeting place where so many people that thought they were all by themselves, alone, dealing with this, an injury in their home, and no one was listening to them, to find community that supported them and made them realize, I'm not alone. We're together on this. I think that that's one of the most powerful things you're about to do. How do we help you with that mission?
Well, firstly, you can go to our website, which is avn.org.au, and on the front page you can sign up to our newsletter, and that keeps everyone updated. That's free. That keeps everyone updated with what we'll be doing and when. We have sent you guys the link, and I'm going to share that, to our SurveyMonkey form that people in Australia can go to and fill out and tell us where they are and a little bit about them, so that we can put them into our database, and when we're touring, we won't miss them. We will find them and we will get those stories, because we don't want to leave anyone behind. You can also, if you feel so moved, you can go to our web shop. So you go to avn.org.au and go to the shop and go to members donation to Australian Vax 2 bus, and you can donate what your heart tells you to do. And any support is much appreciated. And of course, once we get on the road, sharing our stories from Facebook and YouTube and wherever we can manage to post them if they're not taken down. So, just sharing the word and sharing the story, that's, and sending us a lot of love, because we're going to need it.
You sure are, Anita. Thank you for being brave. Brian Hooker, thank you. True heroes from opposite sides of the world all together, right here on both sides of me. I love it. You guys take care. Thank you very much for taking the time to join us.